Hi, I'm Nick Angelis. I'm a nurse anesthetist and I'm the owner of Ascend Health Center. And welcome to the Ascend Health Show. I'm here with Rodney Long Jr., who is an LISW and runs counseling for men. And obviously we have a few questions that we want to talk about, but I want to go back to the hilarious thing I just said a minute ago before we got on camera, which will sound terrible for our audience. But I said the phrase, like, why do we have to meet again? Are you trying to make sure I don't stab you the second or third time we meet? Like, why can't we just meet once, figure out if we're going to be good business partners, and get along with it? We're complaining about networking and things of that nature. But that is what we're going to talk today about: men's mental health, the way we see the world, the way that we perceive it as men, and how sometimes we just want to get things done. We don't want to have meetings over coffee where we sip and say, yeah, we should really work together, and then it doesn't happen. We just want it to work.
Oh, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So how does it work for men? Like, what is it about mental health in men that's so different than, I don't want to say mental health for women, but honestly, even at my clinic, it is a lot of women or men who've been dragged there by women.
Sure, yeah, no. When we first started, our pitch was actually counseling for men and the women who put up with them. And so
That's a good tagline.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We know that most men come to counseling because their wives tell them to. And so if we can just get men in the door, then that's where we want to be with them. So often men are looking at things, and I'm generalizing here, but so often, it's we're looking for solutions. It's what do I just tell me what I got to do. Most of the men I have that come to my clinic say, just tell me what I got to do, I'll fix it, and I can get on with my life. And I always say, okay, what if I told you all you had to do was 30 minutes of yoga every day? And they inevitably laugh and say, well, I'm never going to do that.
Right.
And I say, well, that's the problem, is that until you start changing the way you look at this, you're going to have a little bit of trouble making some progress. Because if we as men are conditioned to constantly look at the fix instead of the process, we're going to have a little bit of trouble. So part of this is changing the way we look at this, I think.
No, that makes sense. And again, we're overgeneralizing, and we won't bother with all that. Oh, what we really mean, just assume we're terrible people and overgeneralizing. It'll make the show go quicker. So if you told a woman, like, okay, this kale smoothie will help everything in your health, then for at least a month or two, there's going to be kale smoothies.
Sure.
If it's a guy, it's like,
yeah.
There's no six pack.
Yeah.
We're not doing this for a second day. We're done here.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, a lot of the instant gratification, I want it now, and a lot of times I tell my clients, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because you don't feel like you've made or haven't made progress in the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, this takes time. A lot of times we're working on changing behaviors that you've developed over a lifetime. So thoughts, behaviors, actions, feelings, those are things that you've developed over 30, 40 years, and now you want to change that. It's not going to happen overnight, and that's what we're looking for as men.
Right.
We say, hey, I don't need an instruction manual. Let me watch a YouTube video for it. I'll change it, and then I can fix what I need.
Does it work to actually, like, give a guy a pointer of, like, oh, try saying this next time when your wife gets mad at you, or when your mom wants you to stop playing video games, and see how that works, and we'll go from there?
Sure.
Or is that, like, just disingenuous and doesn't really work?
No, yeah, I think a lot of my clients are looking for that exactly. So I never tell a client what to do. That doesn't work. We know that. And so what I do oftentimes is somebody might come in and they say, hey, my wife, I'm always going off on my wife, when she wants something. And I'll say, have you considered? That's kind of how I like to approach this. Have you considered trying A, B, or C? And they like having those options, because I'll say, let's get real about this. One of the things I don't like sometimes about counseling is that we get a little too philosophical with it. We say, well, it's all kind of psychological and Freudian and all that. And I say, let's just get real, right? Your wife makes you mad and you make her mad sometimes. Let's figure out how to avoid that. So maybe you could try this, maybe you could try that, and we just get real about what that looks like.
So instead of being like, well, this is Freudian, and when you were 5 years old, you wanted your mother. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, so sometimes that does happen. Believe me, sometimes we get some guys that we got to dig in with. But for the most part, we know men aren't going to spend a lot of time in counseling.
Right.
They're going to spend that couple months that they feel, and if they don't see that progress right away, so we want to always work on that low-hanging fruit of, I always ask, what is something you could change right now that would help you feel like you're making progress? And if it's, hey, I could blow up on my wife less, well, then what's that look like?
Right. Because that puts the responsibility of, surely you can think of one thing you can do better.
Sure.
So for people who've watched this show before, they realize that these this is just my personal therapy. That's all that happens here. And I tend to be philosophical and abstract, and I really like being that. But there's always that component of, am I doing this to shy away from honest truths because I can say something that sounds really good but doesn't mean I actually have to go and change my actions?
Sure.
So that is the challenge of, okay, how do I actually apply this in a practical way instead of just say really nice things? Because it's also true that when I've gone to therapy, because, owning a business and figuring all that out is quite a stressful thing, I've often been like, well, listen, I'm paying you money. Why don't we just have you tell me what to do? I'm here because I think you have some wisdom. So just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and we can forget this whole self-empowerment and just tell me the thing and I'll do it and it's fine.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. A lot of us are looking for that. Hey, just tell me what to do. And I think it goes back too to ownership and personal responsibility about the way you want to live. One thing I tell all my clients is, this is totally up to you. At the end of the day, I'm not going to live your life. So whatever you want to do is on you. If you come in here and you say, I just want to complain for an hour, that's totally up to you.
Probably makes it easier for you too. You just,
that must be tough. That's it. Yep. How does that make you feel? I won't
Solid.
say that. Yeah. But part of that is the personal responsibility about what do you want to happen from here.
Okay.
Because I really shy away from letting clients walk out the door without having the opportunity to make change on their behalf. So when you walk out every session, I'm saying, what are you going to work on at this point? Because the personal responsibility is yours to say, hey, here's what I want to do by the next time I'm out of here. And I think too often in counseling and that's the reason I don't get super philosophical, because we have a lot of good counselors who do that, who are very good at looking at how the past connects. And believe me, we do all that. But realistically, what we're trying to do is say, what do you want, and how are we going to get there? Because oftentimes the best solution is the most simple, and that doesn't mean easy, but it often is the most simple.
Does that mean that men don't want to ruminate about the past as much, that they're almost looking for a life coach of like, hey, right now life sucks, how can it be better? As opposed to like, I'd really like to talk about my mom for a couple months if that's okay with you, and then maybe we'll move on to me being a better person.
Yeah, that's what I find, actually. My counseling has ended up being a lot more motivational than I would have ever expected it to be, in terms of one thing I found is that a lot of men we're tough on the outside, but really soft on the inside. And we really do probably need to talk about your childhood and the stuff with mom. But they don't
Good,
want
let's start right now.
And they don't want to get into that right away, though, right? We got to build some rapport. We got to get to know each other. I got to let you know I can hear you, and that I'm a guy's guy. I'm a man's man, truth be told. And I have trouble talking about my feelings sometimes, right? But so what I'm trying to get guys to do is to say, what is it that you want to do right now first? Because we are inevitably going to have to talk about this stuff in the past. It all connects. There's no way we can avoid it. But right now, what is it that's going to help you, make you feel like you can make some progress? What steps can you take that you feel like, okay, this is what I want to address right now, but I'm going to have to incorporate the other stuff. That's just going to come at a later time when you feel better about it.
Sure. So is it partly that with men, we have to earn their trust, that it's not like, hey, come in and you've paid your money, let's talk about your deepest, darkest secrets. It's more like once they realize, oh, this guy has some good ideas of how I can move forward, maybe now I can also trust him with my past and what led me to this current present.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I'd say counseling in general is that building trust with people. I've always said there's a lot better counselors out there than me. I'm not the world's best counselor, but I am really good at helping people, because I can do things like connect with people and get to know them really well, and figure out what they're saying when they're not really saying something.
Right.
And that is so much a part of it, just as it is knowing the psychological concepts. And so when you and I can just sit down and I can say, hey man, I'm just one guy trying to help another guy. Here's what I see helps people for the most part. You might want to try that. And they can say, you know what, you're right. That seems to work for people.
No, that makes sense. I find the same thing, that I'll have a patient say, well, my pain management doctor told me this, and you're a nurse anesthetist and you're telling me that. And I say, well, no, my goal is not to take the place of your pain management. In fact, for pain patients, we often tell them, like, no, we're not doing this alone. You bring pain management with you. Like, this is a collaborative effort. This isn't just our clinic doing its thing by itself. And it's because, no, I don't think I'm the best at all this. It's simply that we have to take a holistic approach that looks at every part of that. And a lot of times that really beats a narrow specialty that can only look at one issue.
Yeah, I think so much of what we try to do is incorporate all parts of life. One of the things I try to explain to guys a lot of times is it's not just a mental process that's going on here. We need to really connect. Are you eating crappy? Do you work out at all? Do you have energy? Do you have good support system? Do you like work, not like work? Do you have debt you're dealing with? There's so many parts of life that affect your mental health outside of just feeling like I get anxious sometimes or I get depressed sometimes,
Right.
and I need to fix that, and then everything else will be good. It's probably all the other things that are going on in your life too that contribute to that. Right. And that holistic approach really matters, I think, because guys miss that sometimes. They just want to focus on that.
Right.
That one thing.
Although I feel you can't really start with that. So when I first started my clinic, I would tell patients, "Oh, you should take this supplement. It'll really help you." And they're like, And I'm like, "Well, why didn't they get that supplement?" Like, I didn't try to sell it to them. I said, "Here's the cheapest one on Amazon. Start out cheap, and if it works, then we can talk about higher quality options." And then I realized that no one's going to do anything until they first start feeling better. Then they can trust, oh, the ketamine infusion helped, or the talk therapy, or the TMS. And because I'm starting to feel better, now I'm willing to take the steps to make me feel even better. But if you start out with, listen, I know you tried to kill yourself, but avocados, they have some healthy fats. Have you considered they're not going to eat any more avocados?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I like what you said there about kind of not feeling better and then doing more. I always say it's a catch-22. You're not going to feel better until you start doing more to feel better, but you're not going to do more to feel better until you feel better. So it really is a catch-22. Do you feel better first, or do you do stuff first? And so we always try to start small and say, like, what is that one time? That could literally be just getting out of bed in the morning sometimes for guys. That could be when your wife talks to you trying to listen more. It could be a book recommendation. Did you read 3 pages from that book today? And so often we're just trying to get guys to take that first step. I always say, we're not here to be the end point. For most guys, we're not going to be with you your entire life. We're just here to help you start your plan and get on the right track. So we don't want you, we know we're not going to get guys to change their diet and exercise and find a support system and all that kind of stuff right away. That we want to build a plan for you that says, hey, I might only be with you for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, but when you go forward, you can do this.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for.
In anesthesia, I often ask patients, can you walk up a flight of steps without getting short of breath or chest pain? And it is sort of like a baseline, like, do I need to really radically change the drugs I'll give you while you're asleep? Or do we at least have this baseline that I can work on and figure out from there?
Yeah, that's a word we use a lot of times, is baseline. And so, because I think what a lot of guys miss about mental health is that it can be preventative. In the same way that you guys in the medical side of things say, we'd like you to be preventative, that way we don't have to do some things on the back end. I look at mental health the same way and say that if you put these things in place, having good buddies to talk to, when do you like work or not like work? If you spend 40, 50 hours a week sometimes there and you don't like it, you're probably going to have a hard time outside of work. So there's all these little things that we say, be preventative about. If you eat terrible, you're going to feel more lethargic. If you get bad sleep, you're not going to have energy during the day. So there's all these little nuances that if we're preventative about it, guys can make more progress because then their baseline raises. Sometimes it's not about getting them to a higher level. It's just about increasing the baseline. And so I think that if guys can do that and focus on, hey, my baseline is here, but let me get to here, I think that some guys will benefit from that.
Yeah, and it makes sense, too, to first start with raising that baseline, because otherwise things that are helpful may not be helpful, like people who do CrossFit every day and you can't look at their Facebook like, okay, fine, show me a workout of the day. I've been waiting for it's like 5 a.m. I'm sure you've done 2 of them. So because sometimes something helps and people are like, oh, this helps. This helps a lot. And then with my previous analogy, it's like, you can't have avocados for every meal.
No, that's realistic.
Because half of them are bad anyways. I mean, that's a lot of money if you're only eating avocados.
That's true, yeah. I think that's a part of it. It's just being realistic about what your options are, what you want to do. Mm-hmm. I think part of where we fail sometimes in mental health is that we tend to pathologize normal emotions,
Right.
And I always say there's a spectrum, just because you have anxious moments doesn't mean you have general anxiety disorder, you know. Just because you feel depressed and something terrible may have happened doesn't mean you have major depressive disorder. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we can get people to understand that there's a spectrum, and it's okay to wax and wane through that spectrum at times, it doesn't mean it's a disorder that you necessarily need medicated for. And maybe you do, but maybe you don't. And I think that if we can help guys understand that spectrum, that sometimes life stinks and we just are working on how to maintain. And I think if we can understand that spectrum a little better, we can make a little more
Right.
progress too.
No, that's true. I often talk about with a lot of our treatments, since they tend to almost immediately improve mental health, that it's like, well, this isn't the goal to make you happy all the time. It's to make you resilient, because if we change your brain chemicals, you're going to be great until something bad happens again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I love that word resilience, and that's what I'm always talking to guys about, because at the end of the day, so much of men's work is we're tough guys. We can get through anything we need to get through, and I say, hey, you're resilient, you're strong, and that's great. That's what we want. But how do we do that in a way that helps you work through things rather than just get past things?
Right.
And so use that strength as a tool to say, hey, I'm struggling here, and use that strength to talk to people. That way it doesn't get worse before we have to address it.
otherwise you can't live a full life. So I'm a pastor's kid, and one example would be if someone gets homeschooled all their life and then goes to Christian college and goes work for a church. It's like at some point, like life outside of your Christian bubble will occur, and you can extend that 20, 30 years into the future. But all of us at some point deal with loss and heartache and grief and real life. And I'm not saying like, hey, why don't you just take your kids and put them in the worst school district that you can? They're going to be so hardy and resilient.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, I went to a Christian college, Mullen University. Go Pioneers! So I know exactly what you mean. We had a lot of PKs out there, but you're absolutely right. So some of this is about building resilience, but it's finding that balance, you know, and that's what I really like about what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find that balance. There's so often men are defined by what we do instead of who we are. You know, it's David Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist. He wrote a book called The Road to Character. And in it, he describes Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 is your resume self, and he says that's how you present yourself to the world for the most part. And then he has your Adam 2 self, which is your eulogy self, and that's how would you be described at your funeral if people were to be honest about it. And that one always has stuck with me, and I talk to every guy I know about that because I say, if we spent half as much time working on our character as we did our business or our resume self, we'd be making our progress would look a lot different. And I think men would really benefit from seeing that.
We're going to need an altar call after this. I'm feeling very convicted right now. Thanks, Ron.
You and me both, man. Believe me. But you know that's what I tell guys too. You know, it's about the process, not the end point. You know, I believe a hallmark of guys who are making progress and marriages too. I tell my guys who are struggling in their marriage, the hallmarks of a good one is, are you working on it and are you committed to working on it? Not the end point, because it's never going to be perfect. That's life. Life just stinks sometimes. Right. You know, I mean, I'm a counselor. I see a counselor, right? You know, and so you just said you do too. So it's something we all go through. And I think if we can just learn that life is what we make it, and we can decide what we want to be happy with, I think that we'll make a lot more progress that way.
Right. No, that makes sense. But I was thinking of this when I mentioned just put your kid in Akron City schools and they'll be fine. Like, where's that line? Because I mean, I would want tough kids.
Sure.
Like, how can, as a man, we want our boys to be tough and not cry at things, but at the same time, we don't want, like, some broken down 40-year-old, like, I was never allowed to cry. So how can you build resilience, not toughness, but at the same time not overdo it where it's like, Dad, I already did all these push-ups at basketball practice or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's such a great question.
Because we need tough men. Like, let's be honest, society needs, like, masculinity, like a true type of masculinity.
I agree with you, and I wholeheartedly support men being men. Right, that's part of why what we do is we say making good men better. You know, we believe in that. And it's funny you mentioned that because we actually did move my daughter to Akron Public Schools for that reason.
She resilient?
Yeah, super resilient.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah, it worked out for her, but. And that was a part of it, truth be told, and I just had a boy, you know, and we'll probably raise him the same way in that we want them to be exposed to things. But the important part about that is be exposed but have support. Right. There's nothing wrong with being exposed to certain aspects of life. Now, believe me.
So you're saying this isn't Sparta, like you didn't expose him to the hillside for the first month of his life, just a tough
No, I promise it's not like that. I know some people have the wrong idea, but it's not like that, I promise, you know. And she shined, you know, she's at the Honors College in Akron, you know. So I don't know if you know this. My oldest daughter is 18. My youngest baby, I have a 3-week-old too, so we're split the difference
and
there.
That's why you need therapy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Why you need the therapy.
You're right. So, so that resilient part was, hey, we want her to be, she grew up in a tiny town, Ritztown, actually, first. And we said, hey, we need to move her out. quite frankly, it was, if you're going to have a black stepdad, you need to know some black people, right? You can't grow up in a town with no black people and have a black stepdad. So we said, hey, let's move out to Akron, where I'm from. I'm from
This
Akron.
conversation's amazing, by the way.
I'm glad. We said, hey, we want you to be introduced to a more diverse group of people,
Right.
and that will be hard for you, right? Because you're not used to that. You're not used to a lot that would go on there. But we also want you to have the support that you need to thrive, because resilience without support does just create that toughness. My daughter teases me sometimes. She'll say, you're Mr. Hostile. She says I say everything like grr.
Right.
And sometimes I do. But I was raised on that toughness. Just that brash toughness of like dad saying like, go do what you got to do, no crying, just go do what you got to do, right? And if you're a man of a certain age, that's what you're used to. So if your dad raised you that way, you're probably going to raise your kids that way, most likely, because that's what we do. We repeat our cycles. So what we're looking for is how do I get my kid, or how do I get even myself to embrace the resilience and say that things can be tough, but I also need the proper support.
Right.
So like when I'm going through that difficult thing, I need to call Nick and say, hey, Nick, I'm struggling, man. How can I get through this? Or dad or mom or whoever. It might be a church group for some people. Whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with resilience in and of itself. It's resilience without the support that breaks people, and that's not what we want to do.
So what you're saying is, for men, we have to think of it as, we need tools. Just like you're not going to sit there with a screwdriver when you have a drill.
Oh, yeah.
Just think of it as like, look, I've got a toolbox for the right situation. I use the right tool. It's actually manly to know what tool to use for what situation.
Yeah.
Because that would be a stereotype. Like, oh, here I am, like trying to use a flathead instead of a Phillips.
Yeah.
That way it is part of being a man, that if you're going to be logical, if you're going to get things done, then you need the correct tools for the job, and that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. We use that word, actually. We call it your mental health toolbox, and we have a workshop coming up for that, actually, called the Mental Health Workshop for Men. And it's that exactly. Believe me, there were times where I was trying to pull an alternator out with the wrong tools, and it lasts all day, And you don't want to do that. And so the same thing with your mental health. We say, we might teach you something like, let's say walking away, simply just walking away as a tool. If that tool doesn't work, what's the second tool you could use? Would it be controlled breathing? Would it be grounding exercises? Would it be preventative coping skills? Like I exercise or eat right in the morning, or journal even. That way I'm getting my thoughts out sometimes.
Right.
And so we're saying we want you to have 10 tools available for the job, because you don't know which one you're going to need at that time. So the mental health toolbox is what we call it, because we want you to have as many at your disposal as you can.
And that makes a lot more sense than what I started with, which is, you just give them homework like, okay, she says this, you say that, and you don't have to sleep on the couch tonight. It makes more sense of, let's just get 10 or 12 tools, and we don't know exactly when they'll be used, and it's okay if you don't use the optimal tool. Like, you can still use a screwdriver instead of a drill.
Yeah.
You just don't want to use, a hammer instead of a jigsaw or something.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly.
I'm feeling really manly, by the way, mentioning all these tools.
Oh yeah, man, believe me, that's the only thing I ask for anymore, more tools, Christmas, birthday, whatever, more tools, just bring them my way. But I think you're right. It's about finding that right tool. It's not always going to be optimal, we're looking for the best solution at the time. Speaking of being manly, if you've ever repaired anything, sometimes that thing just won't fit. So you just got to use brute force and fit it in there and say, well, that's the best it's going to get sometimes.
That's every time for me.
Yeah. Well, that's the best it's going to get sometimes,
Right.
And so we say, and that's what we say to clients. We say, hey, sometimes that's the best it's going to get.
Yeah.
And we're not looking for you to handle every situation with your wife perfect, because there's going to be friction sometimes.
Right.
What we're looking to do is for you to be able to say, I'm happy with the resolution here. So if you can walk away and say, look, I said less mean things than I did last time, that's progress.
Right.
And it might not be you can do A and B just because I tell you to. It might be that we really got to change the way you look at how you relate to your wife. What are your roles? What are her roles?
Right.
And having those discussions.
Well, that makes sense. So we're not looking for perfection. We can tune in our maleness for that. Like these leaves here, I'm like, they're leaves. They're pretty. They're decoration for the studio. I'm cool with that. And they're like, I think we need to try a leaf pattern here. Hey, could someone get us some different leaves here? And it's the same thing. Like,
same thing.
We're not looking for, this is a precise tool that I need. This is, hey, my life is going better. I can actually engage in some of these conversations where before I knew I'd end up walking away. So it's almost like a snowball effect for debt. Like, again, being a guy, I always thought, well, that's dumb. Why don't you just pay off the 18% one instead of this little tiny 5%?
Sure.
But until you actually see, I can actually do the thing, and instead of buying more foliage, I pay down a credit card. So it can be an avalanche of actually doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's all about momentum is what we're looking for. And in NA, Narcotics Anonymous, they have a saying, progress over perfection.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying, what does progress look like to you? And when we can get people to recognize that it is about personal responsibility. I can't fix your problems for you. At the end of the day, like I just can't. But what we're looking for you to do is say, how can I help you resolve what you're looking to do? Because that's my job. I'm here to help you resolve that stuff. And I can give you suggestions and advice and a plan in the best way. But ultimately, you have to take that up and say, hey, I want to change this. And an example of that would be on the physical health side, losing weight. Right? We know that the concept of losing weight is simple. Obviously, it's hard to implement because most of America is overweight. But eat right, work out. That is the plan for most people, barring a health condition. We say the same thing in mental health. Very easy and simple to understand. Do A, B, C, and D, and you'll feel better. But ultimately, it can be difficult to implement.
Okay, great. Well, we only have a few seconds left. So my practice is in Fair Lawn. We do a lot of telehealth, psychiatry. I'm a nurse anesthetist, so there's some pain management, especially for fibromyalgia, migraines, CRPS, some of those nerve conditions. And where's your practice at?
We're in Kenmore over in Akron, and we offer also telehealth. You can find us online at counseling4.men. Or visit us in Kenmore anytime you're in the neighborhood.
Sounds great. And we're at Ascend Health Center, so thank you all for watching this episode. Now go get more tools for your toolbox.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.